Question 1. Benchmark analysis indicates that a prominent Alabama-based artist, known for their distinctive furniture designs, is concerned about the longevity of their intellectual property rights. The artist has created a unique chair design that has been in production and widely recognized for over 20 years. They are now seeking advice on whether their design rights can be extended indefinitely, given the design's continued commercial success and their personal attachment to it, or if there are specific legal avenues in Alabama to maintain exclusive rights beyond the initial statutory period. Option A. Recommend that the artist can simply re-register the existing design with the Alabama Secretary of State to extend its protection indefinitely, as long as they continue to market it. Option B. Suggest to the artist that their continued use and promotion of the design in Alabama effectively renews its protection, creating an ongoing, perpetual right to exclusivity. Option C. Inform the artist that they can claim common law design rights in Alabama that supersede statutory limitations, allowing for perpetual protection as long as the design remains in use. Option D. Advise the artist that design rights in Alabama have a finite duration as prescribed by statute, and once this period expires, the design enters the public domain, meaning exclusive rights are lost unless a new, distinct design is created and protected. The correct answer is D. Advise the artist that design rights in Alabama have a finite duration as prescribed by statute, and once this period expires, the design enters the public domain, meaning exclusive rights are lost unless a new, distinct design is created and protected. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the creator's desire for ongoing recognition and potential future income from their artistic work against the established legal framework for design rights in Alabama. The creator's emotional attachment to their work and their perception of its enduring value can cloud objective legal assessment. Careful judgment is required to navigate the creator's expectations with the statutory limitations of design rights. The best professional approach involves clearly and accurately informing the client about the duration and scope of design rights as defined by Alabama law, specifically referencing the relevant statutes that govern the lifespan of such protections. This means explaining that design rights, once expired, do not automatically renew or extend indefinitely. The professional must educate the client on the specific time limits and the conditions under which protection ceases, emphasizing that the work enters the public domain upon expiration. This approach is correct because it adheres to the principle of providing accurate legal information and managing client expectations transparently, preventing misunderstandings and potential future disputes. It upholds professional integrity by grounding advice in established Alabama statutory law. An incorrect approach would be to suggest that the creator's continued use and promotion of the design somehow implicitly extends its legal protection beyond the statutory period. This is ethically and legally flawed because it misrepresents the nature of design rights, which are time-bound and do not benefit from perpetual, informal extensions based on market presence. Such advice would violate the professional duty to provide accurate legal counsel and could lead the client to believe they possess rights they do not, potentially exposing them to infringement claims or litigation. Another incorrect approach would be to advise the client that they can simply re-register the design to renew its protection without considering the original registration date and the applicable statutory renewal periods. Alabama law, like most jurisdictions, has specific procedures and timeframes for renewal, and simply re-registering after expiration is not a valid mechanism to revive lapsed rights. This approach fails to acknowledge the finality of expiration and the public domain status of the work. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to recommend that the client pursue a new, slightly modified design to circumvent the expiration of the original. While a new design might be eligible for new protection, this strategy does not address the legal status of the original design and could be seen as an attempt to mislead or exploit the system, rather than providing straightforward advice on the existing rights. It fails to directly answer the client's question about the duration and scope of their current design rights. Professionals should approach such situations by first thoroughly understanding the client's objectives, and then meticulously applying the relevant Alabama statutes governing design rights. This involves researching the specific type of design right, its initial term, and any provisions for renewal. The decision-making process should prioritize transparency, accuracy, and adherence to the law, ensuring the client receives advice that is both legally sound and ethically responsible. Question 2. Risk assessment procedures indicate that an Alabama-based artist is creating a series of paintings that prominently feature altered versions of a well-known beverage company's iconic logo, intending the series to be a commentary on consumer culture and its pervasiveness. The artist plans to exhibit and sell these paintings within Alabama. What is the most prudent course of action for the artist to take regarding the use of the trademark in their artwork? Option A. Make minor alterations to the logo's color scheme and font in the paintings, believing this will sufficiently differentiate the artwork and avoid legal issues. Option B. Proceed with exhibiting and selling the artwork, assuming that artistic commentary and transformation of the logo provide automatic protection against trademark infringement claims. Option C. Display and sell the artwork without any legal review, relying on the belief that the artwork's intent to critique consumerism negates any potential for trademark infringement. Option D. Consult with an Alabama licensed attorney specializing in intellectual property and art law to assess the legal implications and potential defenses under Alabama trademark law. Correct answer is D. Consult with an Alabama licensed attorney specializing in intellectual property and art law to assess the legal implications and potential defenses under Alabama trademark law. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing an artist's creative expression with the legal rights of trademark holders. The artist's intent to comment on consumerism through the use of a well-known brand's logo, while potentially artistic, directly intersects with Alabama trademark law, which protects against infringement and dilution. Careful judgment is required to navigate the fine line between artistic commentary and unauthorized commercial use or misrepresentation. The best professional approach involves seeking legal counsel to assess the specific risks and potential defenses under Alabama law, particularly regarding fair use or parody. This proactive step allows for an informed decision based on the nuances of trademark law as applied to the artwork. Consulting with an attorney specializing in intellectual property and art law in Alabama is crucial. They can analyze whether the artwork constitutes infringement, dilution, or if it falls under a protected category like parody or commentary, considering factors such as the likelihood of consumer confusion, the commercial nature of the use, and the transformative nature of the artwork. This approach prioritizes legal compliance and minimizes potential liability. An incorrect approach would be to assume that artistic intent automatically grants immunity from trademark infringement claims. While artistic expression is valued, it is not an absolute defense against trademark law. The law in Alabama, like elsewhere, aims to prevent confusion among consumers and protect the goodwill associated with a trademark. Simply claiming artistic commentary without understanding the legal framework can lead to significant legal repercussions, including injunctions and damages. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to proceed with displaying and selling the artwork without any legal review, relying solely on the belief that the artwork is transformative. Transformative use is a defense, but its application is highly fact-specific and often requires judicial interpretation. Without legal advice, the artist is operating under a significant assumption that could prove legally unfounded, exposing them to substantial risk. Finally, a flawed approach would be to alter the trademark slightly to avoid direct copying, believing this circumvents legal issues. Minor alterations might sometimes reduce the likelihood of confusion. They do not inherently negate trademark infringement or dilution claims. The overall impression and the likelihood of consumers associating the artwork with the original trademark holder are key considerations under Alabama law. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that begins with identifying potential legal risks associated with the use of any intellectual property, including trademarks. This should be followed by thorough research into the relevant jurisdiction's laws, in this case, Alabama. When dealing with sensitive areas like trademark use in art, seeking expert legal advice early in the creative process is paramount. This allows for informed decisions that balance creative freedom with legal obligations, thereby mitigating potential disputes and financial liabilities. Question 3. The performance metrics show a significant increase in foot traffic at your Birmingham gallery, leading to a potential sale of a valuable piece of Alabama folk art. The consignor, an elderly collector, has provided a consignment agreement that states the artwork has never been subject to significant restoration. However, during your recent inspection, You discovered subtle signs of professional repair on a small section of the canvas, which you believe was done years ago and is not immediately apparent. The potential buyer, a prominent local collector, is expressing strong interest and is asking detailed questions about the artwork's history and condition. How should you proceed? Option A. Focus on the artwork's positive attributes and historical significance, subtly deflecting direct questions about restoration and hoping the buyer does not notice the repair. Option B. Disclose the observed signs of repair to the potential buyer, explaining that you believe it to be minor and historical, and also inform the consignor of your findings and the buyer's inquiry. Option C. Inform the buyer that the artwork has never been restored, mirroring the consignor's statement, and then address any further questions by emphasizing the artwork's overall excellent condition. Option D. Proceed with the sale without mentioning the repair, assuming the consignor's statement in the agreement is sufficient and that the buyer is unlikely to discover it. The correct answer is B. Disclose the observed signs of repair to the potential buyer, explaining that you believe it to be minor and historical, and also inform the consignor of your findings and the buyer's inquiry. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it pits the gallery owner's desire to secure a sale against the ethical obligation to provide accurate and complete information to a potential buyer, particularly concerning the provenance and condition of a valuable artwork. Alabama law, like general principles of contract law and ethical gallery practices, requires good faith and fair dealing in all transactions. Misrepresenting or omitting material facts can lead to legal repercussions, including claims of fraud or misrepresentation, and significant damage to the gallery's reputation. The gallery owner must navigate the pressure of a potential sale while upholding their fiduciary duty to the client and adhering to the terms of any consignment agreement. The best approach involves transparently disclosing all known information about the artwork's history and condition, even if it might deter the buyer. This includes clearly communicating any uncertainties or gaps in the provenance and detailing any restoration or conservation work that has been performed. This approach aligns with Alabama's consumer protection laws, which prohibit deceptive trade practices, and with the ethical standards expected of art dealers who are expected to act as trusted advisors. Honesty and full disclosure build long-term trust and prevent future disputes, ultimately serving the gallery's best interests. An approach that involves downplaying or omitting information about the artwork's condition, such as significant restoration, is ethically unsound and legally risky. This constitutes a misrepresentation of material fact, which could be grounds for rescission of the sale and potential damages under Alabama law. Similarly, fabricating or embellishing the provenance to enhance the artwork's perceived value would be fraudulent. Failing to disclose the existence of a consignment agreement and its terms, if relevant to the buyer's understanding of ownership or the seller's authority to sell, could also be considered a deceptive practice. Professionals should approach such situations by prioritizing transparency and accuracy. Before engaging with a potential buyer, they should thoroughly review all available information about the artwork, including its condition reports, provenance documentation, and any consignment terms. When presenting the artwork, they should proactively disclose all relevant details, addressing potential concerns upfront. If there are any ambiguities or missing pieces of information, these should be clearly communicated. This commitment to honesty and completeness forms the bedrock of ethical art transactions and protects both the buyer and the seller, as well as the reputation of the gallery. Question 4. The efficiency study reveals that an emerging artist in Alabama is preparing for their first major gallery exhibition. The artist has created a series of paintings and is concerned about protecting their intellectual property rights, particularly their copyright, while also wanting the exhibition to be successful and widely promoted. The artist has not yet entered into any formal written agreements with the gallery regarding the exhibition or the use of images of their artwork. What is the most prudent course of action for the artist to ensure their copyright is protected while facilitating the exhibition and its promotion? Option A. The artist should verbally agree to allow the gallery to use images of the artwork for any promotional material, trusting the gallery's discretion. Option B. The artist should assume that displaying their artwork in a gallery, even without a formal contract, implies a transfer of some rights, allowing the gallery to use images for promotional purposes. Option C. The artist should ensure that any loan agreements or exhibition contracts clearly state that copyright remains with them, and that any reproduction rights granted are specific, limited, and temporary, requiring further permission and potential compensation for broader use. Option D. The artist should assume that because the artwork is publicly displayed, it enters the public domain, and they no longer hold exclusive rights. The correct answer is C. The artist should ensure that any loan agreements or exhibition contracts clearly state that copyright remains with them, and that any reproduction rights granted are specific, limited, and temporary, requiring further permission and potential compensation for broader use. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the artist's desire for recognition and potential future commercial value of their work with the legal protections afforded by copyright law in Alabama. The artist's actions could inadvertently waive or weaken their intellectual property rights if not handled carefully. Careful judgment is required to ensure the artist retains control over their creations and can benefit from them in the future. The best professional approach involves the artist retaining all rights to their artwork, unless explicitly and intentionally transferred through a written agreement. This means that by default, the artist, as the creator, holds the copyright. Any exhibition or display of the artwork does not automatically transfer ownership or copyright. The artist should ensure that any loan agreements or exhibition contracts clearly state that copyright remains with them, and that any reproduction rights granted are specific, limited, and temporary, requiring further permission and potential compensation for broader use. This aligns with Alabama's adoption of copyright principles derived from federal law, which presumes copyright ownership vests with the author upon creation. The artist's ability to control derivative works, reproductions, and public distribution is paramount to their continued economic and moral rights. An incorrect approach would be to assume that displaying artwork in a gallery, even without a formal contract, implies a transfer of some rights, or that the gallery has an inherent right to reproduce images of the work for promotional purposes. This overlooks the fundamental principle of copyright that rights are not lost through mere exhibition. Another incorrect approach would be to verbally agree to allow the gallery to use images of the artwork for any promotional material without a written agreement. Verbal agreements regarding intellectual property are notoriously difficult to enforce and can lead to disputes, failing to provide the clear, specific terms required for a valid transfer or license of copyright under Alabama law. Finally, assuming that because the artwork is publicly displayed, it enters the public domain is a significant legal misstep. Public display does not equate to dedication to the public domain. Copyright protection persists until the term expires or is explicitly relinquished. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes clear, written agreements for any transfer or licensing of intellectual property rights. This involves understanding the scope of copyright protection, the rights of the creator, and the legal requirements for transferring or licensing those rights. When dealing with artists and their work, it is crucial to advise them to retain ownership unless a deliberate and well-documented decision is made to transfer or license specific rights under defined terms. This proactive approach safeguards the artist's interests and prevents future legal complications. Question 5. Process analysis reveals that a new artisanal craft beverage company based in Birmingham, Alabama, is developing a unique brand name and logo for its products. To ensure exclusive rights and prevent others from using a similar mark within the state and potentially nationwide, what is the most prudent and legally sound strategy for securing trademark protection under Alabama and federal law? Option A. Rely solely on a quick online search of existing Alabama business names and then proceed with filing a federal trademark application, assuming this provides sufficient protection. Option B. Focus exclusively on registering the trademark with the Alabama Secretary of State's office, as the company's primary operations are within Alabama. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive trademark search encompassing federal databases, USPTO, and Alabama state business registries, followed by filing a federal trademark application, and if deemed beneficial for local protection, a separate Alabama state trademark application. Option D. Prioritize speed and cost by filing only a federal trademark application without any prior search, believing that the USPTO will identify any conflicts. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive trademark search encompassing federal databases, USPTO, and Alabama state business registries, followed by filing a federal trademark application, and if deemed beneficial for local protection, a separate Alabama state trademark application. Explanation. Process analysis reveals that navigating the trademark registration process in Alabama for a new artisanal craft beverage company presents a unique set of professional challenges. The primary difficulty lies in ensuring that the proposed trademark is not only distinctive and memorable, but also legally available and compliant with both federal and state intellectual property laws. Missteps can lead to costly rebrandings, infringement lawsuits, and significant delays in market entry. Careful judgment is required to balance creative branding aspirations with the stringent legal requirements of trademark protection. The best professional approach involves conducting a thorough federal and state trademark search, followed by the preparation and filing of a comprehensive application with the United States Patent and Trademark Office (USPTO), and, where applicable, with the Alabama Secretary of State's Office for State-Level Protections. This approach is correct because it proactively addresses potential conflicts by identifying existing trademarks that might be confusingly similar to the proposed mark. Filing with the USPTO secures nationwide protection, while state registration can offer additional layers of protection within Alabama, especially for businesses operating solely within the state. This dual approach maximizes the likelihood of successful registration and robust legal standing, adhering to the principles of due diligence and comprehensive legal protection mandated by intellectual property law. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on a quick online search of existing business names registered in Alabama and then proceed directly to filing a federal trademark application without a comprehensive search. This is professionally unacceptable because it fails to account for unregistered but established common law trademarks, which can still be legally protected and could lead to infringement claims. Furthermore, it neglects the potential benefits of state-level registration for businesses primarily operating within Alabama. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to prioritize speed and cost-effectiveness by only filing a federal trademark application without any prior search, assuming that if it's not registered federally, it's free to use. This is a significant regulatory failure, as it ignores the existence of common law rights and the possibility of opposition proceedings during the federal registration process. It also overlooks the potential for state-specific protections that might be relevant to the Alabama market. A third incorrect approach involves focusing exclusively on state-level trademark registration in Alabama and neglecting the federal registration process. While state registration offers protection within Alabama, it does not provide nationwide rights. This is a strategic error that limits the company's ability to expand its brand presence beyond the state borders and leaves it vulnerable to infringement by entities operating in other states. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of legal requirements, business objectives, and risk assessment. Professionals should begin by understanding the scope of protection desired local, state, or national. This should be followed by a comprehensive search strategy that includes federal, state, and common law databases. Based on the search results, a risk assessment should be performed to identify potential conflicts. Finally, a strategic filing plan should be developed, considering the most effective and efficient means of securing the desired trademark protection, whether through federal registration, state registration, or a combination thereof, always prioritizing compliance with applicable laws and regulations. Question 6. Process analysis reveals that a small artisan workshop in Birmingham, Alabama, has developed a unique, intricately carved wooden lamp. The carving is highly decorative and contributes significantly to the lamp's aesthetic appeal, but the functional design of the lamp itself, e.g., the base, the light socket mechanism, is standard. The workshop owner wishes to protect the distinctive carved design from being copied by competitors. Considering Alabama's intellectual property landscape, which of the following strategies best addresses the owner's protection needs? Option A. Seek design patent protection for the entire lamp, focusing on the ornamental aspects of the carving as the novel element. Option B. Rely solely on copyright registration for the carved design, assuming that any artistic element is automatically protected. Option C. Pursue copyright registration for the carved design as an artistic work, and investigate trade dress protection if the lamp design has become a recognizable source identifier in the market. Option D. Advise the owner that only the functional aspects of the lamp can be protected, and since the carving is purely decorative, it falls outside legal protection. Correct answer is C. Pursue copyright registration for the carved design as an artistic work, and investigate trade dress protection if the lamp design has become a recognizable source identifier in the market. Explanation. Process analysis reveals that navigating the nuances of design rights in Alabama, particularly concerning artistic works incorporated into functional items, presents a significant professional challenge. The core difficulty lies in distinguishing between purely artistic expression, which may be protected by copyright, and designs that serve a functional purpose, which are more likely to fall under design patent or trade dress protection under Alabama law. This requires a careful assessment of the item's primary purpose and the nature of the design element. The best professional approach involves a comprehensive review of the design's functionality and aesthetic elements in light of Alabama's intellectual property laws. This means determining whether the design is dictated by its function, or if it possesses separable artistic features that are not essential to the item's utility. If separable artistic features exist, they may be eligible for copyright protection. If the design as a whole is primarily ornamental and not dictated by function, it could be a candidate for design patent protection. Furthermore, if the design has acquired distinctiveness in the marketplace and serves to identify the source of the goods, it may be protected as trade dress. This multifaceted analysis ensures all potential avenues of protection under Alabama law are considered and pursued appropriately, aligning with the principles of intellectual property law designed to foster innovation and creativity. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on copyright registration for a design that is integral to the functionality of a product. Alabama law, like federal law, generally does not protect functional aspects of a design through copyright. Copyright protects the expression of an idea, not the idea itself or its functional implementation. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to assume that any aesthetically pleasing design automatically qualifies for design patent protection, without first assessing whether it is ornamental and separable from function. Design patents are specific and require the design to be novel, original, and ornamental. Failing to consider trade dress protection when a design has achieved market recognition as a source identifier would also be an oversight, as this offers a distinct form of protection under Alabama law for non-functional, distinctive product configurations. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with a thorough understanding of the client's product and its market. This involves dissecting the design into its functional and aesthetic components. Subsequently, they must consult relevant Alabama statutes and case law pertaining to copyright, design patents, and trade dress. A comparative analysis of the design against the criteria for each form of protection is crucial. This systematic evaluation ensures that the most appropriate and robust legal protections are sought, safeguarding the client's intellectual property assets effectively within the specific legal framework of Alabama. Question 7. Process analysis reveals that two Alabama artists, Sarah and Mark, collaborated on a series of paintings intended for exhibition and potential sale. Sarah conceived the initial artistic concept and provided the primary thematic direction, while Mark executed the majority of the brushwork and contributed significantly to the visual execution of the pieces. No formal written agreement was established between them regarding copyright ownership or the division of rights. If they wished to license the reproduction rights for these paintings to a gallery in Birmingham, Alabama, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure legal compliance regarding copyright ownership and transfer? Option A. Both Sarah and Mark must agree to and sign any licensing agreement, as they are presumed to be co-owners of the copyright in the collaborative works. Option B. Mark, having executed the majority of the artwork, should be considered the primary copyright holder and is solely responsible for licensing the rights. Option C. They should proceed with licensing the rights through a third-party agent who will determine the most equitable distribution of royalties, assuming this implicitly resolves ownership. Option D. Only Sarah, as the originator of the concept, has the authority to license the reproduction rights, as her contribution is considered the foundational element. Correct answer is A. Both Sarah and Mark must agree to and sign any licensing agreement, as they are presumed to be co-owners of the copyright in the collaborative works. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential for ambiguity in copyright ownership when a work is created collaboratively by individuals who are not formally affiliated as employees or under a clear work-for-hire agreement. The Alabama Art Law exam requires a nuanced understanding of how copyright vests and transfers in such situations, necessitating careful consideration of the parties' intentions and the nature of their contributions. The best professional approach involves recognizing that copyright ownership in Alabama, as governed by federal copyright law which Alabama law adheres to, generally vests in the author of a work. In a collaborative creation scenario where no formal agreement exists, the default presumption is that each individual who contributed original expression to the work is a co-owner of the copyright. Therefore, any transfer of rights must involve the consent and participation of all identified co-owners. This approach aligns with the principle that copyright is a bundle of rights that can only be transferred by the rightful owner. An incorrect approach would be to assume that the individual who initiated the project or provided the most significant financial investment is the sole copyright owner. This fails to acknowledge the contributions of others who may have added original expression, thereby violating the co-ownership principles established by copyright law. Such an assumption could lead to unauthorized use and potential litigation for infringement. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with a transfer of rights based solely on the agreement of one party, even if that party appears to be the most prominent or influential. This disregards the legal reality that all co-owners must agree to any transfer of their copyright interests. Failing to secure the consent of all co-owners renders any purported transfer invalid and exposes the parties to legal repercussions. A further incorrect approach is to assume that because the work is intended for commercial sale, the copyright automatically vests in the entity that will market or distribute it, without a formal assignment or work-for-hire agreement. While work-for-hire is a mechanism for vesting copyright in an employer or commissioning party, it requires specific conditions to be met, which are not evident in this scenario. Without these conditions, the creators remain the copyright holders. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes clear identification of all creators and their contributions. When collaborative works are involved, it is crucial to establish written agreements that explicitly define copyright ownership, licensing, and transfer rights from the outset. If such agreements are absent, seeking legal counsel to clarify co-ownership and facilitate necessary agreements among all parties is the most prudent course of action before any transfer of rights is attempted. Question 8. What factors determine the extent to which a gallery in Alabama can alter or recontextualize a purchased artwork without infringing upon the original artist's moral rights? Option A. The financial investment made by the gallery in acquiring the artwork, which grants them absolute discretion over its presentation and modification. Option B. The presence of explicit contractual clauses addressing post-sale modifications. The artist's intent as ascertainable through their body of work and statements, and any established common law principles in Alabama regarding artistic integrity. Option C. The gallery owner's subjective assessment of what would enhance the artwork's commercial appeal and marketability in the current art climate. Option D. The prevailing aesthetic trends in the art world at the time of exhibition, regardless of the artist's original intentions or any prior agreements. The correct answer is B. The presence of explicit contractual clauses addressing post-sale modifications, the artist's intent as ascertainable through their body of work and statements, and any established common law principles in Alabama regarding artistic integrity. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the artist's inherent moral rights under Alabama law with the contractual obligations and potential financial interests of the gallery owner. The artist's right to attribution and integrity of their work, even after sale, can conflict with a gallery's desire to modify or decontextualize artwork for commercial purposes or to align with evolving aesthetic trends. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing interests without violating established legal principles. The best professional approach involves prioritizing the artist's moral rights as recognized by Alabama law, specifically the right of attribution and the right of integrity. This means consulting the artist or their estate regarding any proposed alterations or significant contextual changes to the artwork. If the artist is deceased, the gallery should make reasonable efforts to ascertain the wishes of their heirs or estate concerning the integrity of the work. This approach is correct because Alabama law, while not as comprehensive as some jurisdictions in explicitly codifying all aspects of moral rights, generally recognizes the artist's connection to their work. The right of attribution is implicitly protected through common law principles of authorship and the ethical standards of the art world. The right of integrity, while less explicitly defined in statute, is often protected through contractual agreements or can be inferred from the artist's intent and the nature of the artwork. adhering to these principles upholds ethical standards and legal obligations. An incorrect approach would be to assume that the sale of the artwork extinguishes all of the artist's rights, including those related to its integrity and attribution. This fails to acknowledge the legal and ethical considerations surrounding moral rights, which can persist even after ownership has transferred. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with significant alterations or decontextualization without any attempt to consult the artist or their representatives, thereby potentially violating the artist's right of integrity and misrepresenting the original artistic intent. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize the gallery's immediate commercial interests over the artist's established rights, leading to potential legal disputes and damage to the gallery's reputation within the art community. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all relevant legal rights and ethical considerations. This involves understanding the specific legal protections afforded to artists in Alabama, including any statutory or common law recognition of moral rights. Next, they should assess the nature of the proposed action and its potential impact on the artwork and the artist's reputation. Consultation with legal counsel specializing in art law is advisable when significant alterations or disputes are anticipated. Finally, professionals should strive for a resolution that respects the artist's moral rights while also considering the practicalities of art exhibition and commerce, ideally through open communication and, where possible, agreement with the artist or their estate. Question 9. Process analysis reveals that an Alabama artist is creating a new mixed-media sculpture that incorporates fragments of a copyrighted photograph taken by another artist. The artist intends to exhibit and potentially sell this sculpture. What is the most prudent course of action for the Alabama artist to ensure compliance with Alabama's interpretation of the fair use doctrine under U.S. copyright law? Option A. Seek informal advice from other artists or gallery owners in Alabama about whether the use of the photograph appears acceptable for artistic purposes. Option B. Conduct a detailed, documented analysis of the 4 statutory fair use factors, considering the transformative nature of the new work, the nature of the original photograph, the amount used, and the potential market impact, and consult legal counsel if significant doubt remains. Option C. Proceed with the creation and exhibition of the sculpture, assuming that any artistic alteration or incorporation into a new work automatically constitutes fair use. Option D. Make a quick, subjective judgment about whether the new sculpture is sufficiently different from the original photograph to avoid copyright infringement, without formal documentation. The correct answer is B. Conduct a detailed, documented analysis of the 4 statutory fair use factors, considering the transformative nature of the new work, the nature of the original photograph, the amount used, and the potential market impact, and consult legal counsel if significant doubt remains. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an Alabama artist because the fair use doctrine, while a defense against copyright infringement, is highly fact-specific and requires careful balancing of 4 statutory factors under Section 107 of the U.S. Copyright Act, as interpreted by Alabama courts. The artist must navigate the subjective nature of these factors to determine if their use of existing artwork in a new creation constitutes fair use or infringes upon the original artist's rights. This requires a nuanced understanding of copyright law and a proactive approach to risk assessment. The best professional approach involves a thorough, documented analysis of all 4 fair use factors as applied to the specific artwork and the intended use. This includes evaluating the purpose and character of the new work, e.g., transformative, commercial, educational, the nature of the original copyrighted work, the amount and substantiality of the portion used in relation to the original work, and the effect of the use upon the potential market for or value of the copyrighted work. By meticulously documenting this analysis, the artist creates a strong defense should a copyright dispute arise, demonstrating good faith and a diligent effort to comply with the law. This proactive, analytical approach is the most legally sound and ethically responsible, an approach that involves proceeding with the artwork without any consideration of fair use, assuming that any artistic transformation automatically grants permission, is professionally unacceptable. This fails to acknowledge the statutory requirements of fair use and the potential for infringement claims. It disregards the legal framework designed to protect copyright holders and places the artist at significant legal risk. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to rely solely on the opinion of a non-legal professional, such as a fellow artist or gallery owner, regarding fair use. While their input might be helpful for artistic critique, they are not qualified to provide legal advice on copyright law. This approach outsources critical legal judgment to an unqualified source, demonstrating a failure to exercise due diligence and potentially leading to an incorrect assessment of legal risk. Finally, an approach that involves making a cursory, undocumented assessment of fair use based on a general feeling that the new work is different enough is also professionally deficient. This lacks the rigor required by the fair use doctrine and fails to provide any substantiation for the claim of fair use. In the event of a legal challenge, such a vague and unsubstantiated defense would be easily overcome by a copyright holder. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and risk mitigation. This involves 1. Identifying potential copyright issues early in the creative process. 2. Conducting a detailed, factor-by-factor analysis of fair use, referencing relevant case law and statutory provisions. 3. Documenting the entire analysis thoroughly. 4. Seeking qualified legal counsel when there is uncertainty or significant risk. 5. Considering alternative creative approaches if fair use is unlikely to apply. Question 10. The control framework reveals that a small independent bookstore in Birmingham, Alabama, has discovered that a large online retailer has been selling unauthorized copies of a unique, locally authored children's book for the past 18 months. The bookstore, which holds the exclusive distribution rights for this book in Alabama, has confirmed that the online retailer has sold approximately 5,000 copies of the infringing book. The bookstore's legal counsel has advised that the infringement was willful, as the online retailer had previously been notified about similar copyright issues. The bookstore is seeking to recover damages. If the bookstore opts to pursue statutory damages, and assuming the court finds the infringement to be willful, what is the maximum potential statutory damage award the bookstore could seek per infringed copy of the book? Option A, $200 Option B, $150,000 Option C, $30,000 Option D, $750. The correct answer is B, $150,000. Explanation. The control framework reveals a scenario that is professionally challenging due to the potential for significant financial penalties and reputational damage associated with copyright infringement. Navigating the nuances of fair use and statutory damages requires careful judgment and a thorough understanding of Alabama copyright law. The best professional approach involves a precise calculation of potential statutory damages based on the infringer's knowledge and the nature of the infringement, as outlined in the U.S. Copyright Act, which is applicable in Alabama. This approach prioritizes accurate legal and financial assessment to inform strategic decision-making. Specifically, it requires determining if the infringement was willful or innocent, as this significantly impacts the damage range. For a willful infringement, the range is $750 to $150,000 per work infringed. For an innocent infringement, the range is $200 to $30,000 per work. The calculation must then consider the number of infringed works and the court's discretion within these statutory limits. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the infringer's perceived financial capacity to pay. This fails to adhere to the statutory framework for calculating damages, which is based on the infringement itself, not the infringer's ability to pay. The law provides specific ranges for statutory damages to deter infringement and compensate copyright holders, irrespective of the infringer's financial situation. Another incorrect approach is to estimate damages based on a percentage of the infringer's profits. While actual damages and profits are alternative remedies, statutory damages are a distinct option. Relying on a profit-based estimation when statutory damages are available and potentially more advantageous or appropriate for the situation bypasses the legal framework for statutory damages and may lead to an inaccurate and legally unsupported claim. A further incorrect approach is to demand a settlement amount that is arbitrarily higher than the maximum statutory damages without a clear legal basis. This tactic, while potentially aggressive, lacks legal grounding and could be viewed as extortionate, undermining the credibility of the copyright holder's claim and potentially leading to negative legal repercussions. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying the specific copyrighted works infringed. 2. Determining the nature of the infringement, e.g., willful, innocent. 3. Consulting with legal counsel specializing in Alabama copyright law to understand the applicable statutory damage ranges and potential for actual damages. 4. Calculating a range of potential statutory damages based on the legal framework. 5. Evaluating the strength of the case for actual damages and profits. 6. Developing a negotiation strategy informed by these calculations and legal advice, aiming for a resolution that is both legally sound and financially equitable. Question 11. Strategic planning requires an artist in Alabama to select a unique brand name for their new line of handcrafted pottery. Considering the principles of trademark law in Alabama, which of the following approaches to selecting a brand name would provide the strongest legal protection and best distinguish the artist's products from competitors? Option A. Selecting a name that is geographically descriptive, like Tuscaloosa Clay Creations, which indicates the origin of the pottery. Option B. Using a name that is generic for the product, such as Alabama Pottery, which broadly categorizes the items. Option C. Choosing a name that is arbitrary or fanciful, such as Ember Glow Pottery, which has no inherent connection to pottery but is memorable and distinctive. Option D. Opting for a name that is suggestive of the pottery's quality, such as Durable Designs, implying resilience and longevity. The correct answer is C. Choosing a name that is arbitrary or fanciful, such as Ember Glow Pottery, which has no inherent connection to pottery but is memorable and distinctive. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of trademark law in Alabama, specifically differentiating between the types of marks and their registrability, while also considering the practical business implications of choosing a mark. The artist must balance their creative vision with legal protections to ensure their brand is both distinctive and defensible. Careful judgment is required to avoid costly legal disputes and to build a strong, recognizable brand identity. The best professional approach involves conducting thorough research to identify marks that are inherently distinctive or have acquired distinctiveness through use in Alabama. This means looking for marks that are arbitrary, fanciful, or suggestive in relation to the artist's goods or services, as these are the strongest and most easily protected. For example, if the artist sells abstract sculptures, a fanciful name like Chroma Sculpt would be highly distinctive. This approach aligns with Alabama's trademark registration requirements, which prioritize distinctiveness to prevent consumer confusion. The goal is to select a mark that is not merely descriptive of the goods or services, nor generic, as these categories offer minimal to no trademark protection under Alabama law. An incorrect approach would be to select a mark that is merely descriptive of the artist's work or style. For instance, naming a series of landscape paintings "Beautiful Alabama Scenery" would be descriptive. While it accurately describes the subject matter, it fails to distinguish the artist's work from that of other artists depicting similar scenes. Under Alabama trademark law, descriptive marks are generally not registrable unless they have acquired secondary meaning, meaning consumers have come to associate the descriptive term specifically with the artist's brand. Without this acquired distinctiveness, such a mark would be vulnerable to challenges and difficult to enforce. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to choose a generic term for the artist's goods or services. For example, calling a collection of paintings simply paintings would be generic. Generic terms are the common names for products or services and can never be exclusively owned as trademarks by any single entity. Alabama law, like all trademark law, prohibits the registration of generic terms because doing so would unfairly monopolize common language and hinder competition. Finally, selecting a mark that is confusingly similar to an existing registered or unregistered trademark in Alabama for related goods or services is also a critical failure. This could involve choosing a name that sounds alike, looks alike, or has a similar commercial impression to a mark already in use. For instance, if another Alabama artist is already known for Southern brushstrokes, choosing Southern brush art could lead to consumer confusion and infringement claims, violating the core principle of trademark law to prevent such confusion. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the artist's brand identity and target audience. This is followed by a comprehensive search for existing marks in Alabama, focusing on distinctiveness. The process should involve evaluating potential marks against the legal standards for registrability, prioritizing arbitrary, fanciful, or suggestive marks, and assessing the likelihood of acquired distinctiveness for suggestive marks. Ethical considerations include ensuring the chosen mark does not infringe on existing rights and accurately reflects the artist's unique offering. Question 12. Process analysis reveals that an artist in Alabama is creating a series of paintings that incorporate well-known corporate logos in a satirical manner, intending to critique consumerism. The artist has not sought permission from the trademark holders. What is the most prudent course of action for the artist to ensure compliance with Alabama's intellectual property laws regarding trademark infringement and dilution? Option A. Rely solely on the artist's intent to critique and the lack of direct commercial sale of the artwork as sufficient protection against trademark claims. Option B. Consult with an Alabama-licensed intellectual property attorney to assess the likelihood of consumer confusion and dilution under federal and state law, and to explore potential defenses. Option C. Proceed with the artwork, assuming that artistic satire is automatically protected under free speech principles and supersedes trademark law. Option D. Make minor alterations to the logos, such as changing a few colors or fonts, believing this will prevent any claims of infringement. The correct answer is B. Consult with an Alabama-licensed intellectual property attorney to assess the likelihood of consumer confusion and dilution under federal and state law, and to explore potential defenses. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the rights of a trademark holder with the potential for artistic expression and commentary. The artist's intent to critique a brand, while potentially protected under certain free speech principles, directly intersects with Alabama's trademark laws, which aim to prevent consumer confusion and protect brand reputation. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legitimate artistic commentary and actionable infringement or dilution. The best professional approach involves a thorough legal analysis of Alabama trademark law, specifically focusing on the likelihood of consumer confusion and the distinctiveness of the original mark. This approach requires consulting with legal counsel specializing in intellectual property law in Alabama to assess whether the artist's use of the mark constitutes infringement under the Alabama Deceptive Trade Practices Act, or the Lanham Act, as applied in Alabama. It also necessitates an evaluation of whether the use is likely to cause dilution of the distinctive quality of the original mark, considering factors such as the fame of the original mark and the similarity of the marks and the goods/services. This legally grounded assessment ensures compliance with state and federal trademark protections, while also considering potential defenses. An incorrect approach would be to assume that any use of a trademark in art is automatically protected as free speech, without considering the specific provisions of Alabama trademark law. This overlooks the legal framework designed to prevent unfair competition and protect consumers from misleading associations. Relying solely on artistic intent without legal due diligence fails to address the potential for consumer confusion or dilution, which are central to trademark infringement claims. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with the artwork without any legal consultation, believing that the artistic context negates any potential legal issues. This demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and an ignorance of the potential legal ramifications. Trademark holders have legal recourse, and proceeding without understanding these risks can lead to costly litigation, injunctions, and damages. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to modify the trademark slightly and assume this automatically resolves any infringement concerns. While minor modifications can sometimes be a factor in infringement analysis, they do not automatically immunize the artwork from a claim of infringement or dilution. Comprehensive legal review is still necessary to determine if the modified mark is likely to cause confusion or dilute the original mark's distinctiveness. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and risk assessment. This involves 1. Identifying potential intellectual property issues early in the creative process. 2. Conducting thorough legal research specific to the relevant jurisdiction, Alabama in this case. 3. Seeking expert legal counsel to interpret complex laws and assess risks. 4. Evaluating the potential impact on all stakeholders, including the trademark holder, the artist, and the public. 5. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale behind the chosen course of action. Question 13. Quality control measures reveal that a gallery in Birmingham, Alabama, is considering exhibiting a series of paintings created by a renowned Alabama artist who passed away in 1995. The gallery wishes to understand when these paintings will definitively enter the public domain in Alabama. Which of the following assessments most accurately reflects the copyright duration for these works? Option A. The copyright protection for these paintings will expire 70 years from the date of their first exhibition. Option B. The copyright protection for these paintings will expire 95 years from the date of their creation. Option C. The copyright protection for these paintings will expire 70 years after the artist's death in 1995. Option D. The copyright protection for these paintings will expire 50 years after their first exhibition. Correct answer is C. The copyright protection for these paintings will expire 70 years after the artist's death in 1995. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires navigating the complex and often lengthy duration of copyright protection under Alabama law, specifically concerning works created by an individual artist. Misinterpreting the duration can lead to significant legal and financial repercussions, including infringement claims and loss of potential licensing revenue. Careful judgment is required to accurately determine when a work enters the public domain. The best professional approach involves meticulously researching the specific creation date of the artwork and the artist's status at that time. Under Alabama law, which largely follows federal copyright law, the duration of copyright for works created by an individual author is generally the life of the author plus 70 years. If the work was created before January 1, 1978, and not published, different rules apply, but for works created on or after that date, the life plus 70 standard is the primary consideration. This approach is correct because it directly applies the established legal framework for copyright duration, ensuring compliance and accurate assessment of the work's public domain status. An incorrect approach would be to assume a fixed term, such as 50 or 95 years, without considering the author's lifespan. This fails to account for the life plus 70 standard, which is the prevailing rule for works created by individual authors in the modern era. Another incorrect approach would be to rely on the publication date alone without considering the author's death date, especially for works created before 1978, where publication date was a key factor, but life of the author also played a role in certain contexts. This overlooks the nuances of copyright duration that extend beyond mere publication. Finally, assuming copyright protection automatically expires after a set number of years without any specific research into the work's creation, and the author's life is a significant regulatory failure, as it disregards the legal protections afforded to creators and their heirs. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes thorough legal research. This involves identifying the relevant jurisdiction, Alabama, in this case, determining the date of creation or publication, identifying the author, and then applying the specific copyright duration rules applicable to that work and author under Alabama and federal law. When in doubt, consulting with an intellectual property attorney specializing in Alabama art law is the most prudent course of action. Question 14. Process analysis reveals that a gallery in Birmingham, Alabama, is preparing to sell a painting attributed to a well-known Southern artist. The gallery has received documentation from the current owner suggesting a lineage of ownership dating back several decades, including a mention of a prominent local collector. However, some of the dates and names in the provided documentation appear inconsistent with publicly available records. What is the most responsible course of action for the gallery to ensure compliance with Alabama's principles of fair dealing and accurate representation in art sales? Option A. Rely solely on the seller's provided documentation and verbal assurances, assuming the information is accurate unless proven otherwise. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive provenance investigation, verifying ownership history, exhibition records, and expert opinions, and transparently disclose any findings or uncertainties to potential buyers. Option C. Proceed with the sale based on the available documentation, but omit any mention of the provenance details that appear inconsistent with public records. Option D. Immediately halt the sale and refuse to handle the artwork due to the apparent discrepancies in its provenance. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive provenance investigation, verifying ownership history, exhibition records, and expert opinions, and transparently disclose any findings or uncertainties to potential buyers. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because the value and authenticity of an artwork are directly tied to its history of ownership and creation. Misrepresenting or failing to adequately investigate provenance can lead to significant financial losses, damage to reputation, and potential legal ramifications under Alabama law concerning fraud and misrepresentation. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all claims about an artwork's history are accurate and verifiable. The best professional approach involves a thorough and documented investigation of the artwork's provenance, including tracing its ownership history, exhibition records, and any relevant expert opinions. This meticulous process ensures that the information presented to potential buyers or stakeholders is accurate and defensible. Under Alabama law, particularly concerning contract law and consumer protection, transparency and truthfulness in representations about goods, including art, are paramount. Failing to conduct due diligence on provenance could be construed as negligent misrepresentation or even fraudulent if done with intent to deceive. Ethical standards within the art market also demand this level of diligence to maintain trust and integrity. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the seller's verbal assurances without independent verification. This fails to meet the standard of due diligence expected in art transactions and leaves the professional vulnerable to unknowingly perpetuating false information. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of commitment to accuracy. Legally, it could expose the professional to liability if the provenance turns out to be fabricated, as they have not taken reasonable steps to ascertain its truth. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss any discrepancies in the provenance as minor or irrelevant without further investigation. While some minor gaps might be explainable, significant inconsistencies or a lack of documentation can be red flags. Alabama's consumer protection laws and general principles of contract law require that material facts be accurately represented. Ignoring potential issues, even if not intentionally deceptive, can still lead to liability if it results in a misrepresentation that a buyer relies upon to their detriment. A final incorrect approach is to present the provenance information as definitive without acknowledging any uncertainties or ongoing research. The art market often involves complex histories, and absolute certainty may not always be achievable. However, professionals have an ethical and legal obligation to be transparent about the level of certainty they possess. Alabama law, while not having specific statutes on art provenance, operates under general principles of disclosure and good faith in commercial dealings. Failing to disclose known uncertainties can be seen as misleading. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes verification and transparency. This involves establishing a clear protocol for provenance research, cross-referencing information from multiple reliable sources, consulting with art historians and conservators when necessary, and clearly communicating any limitations or uncertainties to clients and buyers. This systematic approach mitigates risk and upholds professional integrity within the framework of Alabama's legal and ethical expectations for art transactions. Question 15. The assessment process reveals that a visual artist based in Birmingham, Alabama, has created a unique and intricate design for a new line of decorative tiles. The artist is concerned about protecting this design from unauthorized reproduction and sale by competitors. Considering the legal landscape in Alabama, which of the following actions represents the most effective strategy for securing comprehensive legal protection for the tile design? Option A. Relying on informal written agreements with any potential manufacturers or distributors. Option B. Seeking protection solely through Alabama's state trademark registration for the design itself. Option C. Registering the design with the U.S. Copyright Office. Option D. Assuming that the design is automatically protected by common law copyright upon its creation. The correct answer is C. Registering the design with the U.S. Copyright Office. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a scenario that is professionally challenging due to the inherent tension between protecting an artist's intellectual property and the practicalities of commercialization and public access to art. Navigating the registration and protection of designs in Alabama requires a nuanced understanding of the Alabama Deceptive Trade Practices Act and relevant federal copyright law, as these are the primary frameworks governing design protection within the state. The artist's desire for broad protection must be balanced against the legal requirements and the potential for infringement by others. Careful judgment is required to ensure the chosen method of protection is both legally sound and practically effective. The best professional approach involves proactively registering the design with the U.S. Copyright Office. This is the correct and most robust method for protecting original artistic works, including designs, under federal law, which is applicable in Alabama. Registration provides a public record of ownership, establishes a clear timeline for protection, and is a prerequisite for filing an infringement lawsuit in federal court. This approach directly addresses the need for legal protection and provides the strongest recourse against unauthorized use, aligning with the principles of intellectual property law. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on informal agreements or verbal understandings with potential licensees. While such agreements might offer some contractual recourse, they do not provide the same level of legal standing or public notice as formal registration. This failure to establish a clear, legally recognized ownership claim leaves the design vulnerable to infringement and significantly weakens the artist's ability to enforce their rights. Another incorrect approach is to assume that the mere creation of the design automatically confers full legal protection without any formal steps. While common law copyright protection exists from the moment of creation, it is limited in scope and difficult to prove in disputes. Without registration, the artist faces significant hurdles in demonstrating ownership and pursuing legal remedies, making the design susceptible to unauthorized reproduction and exploitation. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to only seek protection under state-specific trademark law for the design itself, rather than copyright. While trademarks protect brand identifiers, they are not the primary mechanism for protecting the artistic expression of a design. Relying solely on trademark principles for design protection would overlook the fundamental copyright protections available and leave the artistic elements of the design inadequately safeguarded. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the nature of the intellectual property being protected. Artistic design vs. brand identifier, identifying the relevant legal frameworks, federal copyright, state laws, and selecting the most effective and legally recognized protection mechanisms. This involves assessing the risks and benefits of different protection strategies, with a strong emphasis on formal registration where applicable, to ensure robust and enforceable rights. Question 16. Process analysis reveals that the estate of a prominent Alabama collector has inherited a valuable ancient artifact. Subsequent research suggests this artifact may have been illicitly exported from a country that is a signatory to the 1970 UNESCO Convention. The estate is considering its options regarding the artifact's disposition. Which of the following approaches best navigates the legal and ethical complexities presented by this situation under Alabama law, considering potential international treaty obligations? Option A. Contact the government of the country of origin to inquire about their interest in the artifact, without seeking legal advice on the implications of international treaties. Option B. Immediately list the artifact for auction with a reputable international auction house, relying on their due diligence processes to handle any provenance issues. Option C. Proceed with the disposition of the artifact under Alabama probate law, assuming clear title based on possession within the state. Option D. Engage legal counsel specializing in international art law and cultural property to assess the applicability of international treaties and advise on compliance with both domestic and international legal frameworks. Correct answer is D. Engage legal counsel specializing in international art law and cultural property to assess the applicability of international treaties and advise on compliance with both domestic and international legal frameworks. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires navigating the intersection of domestic Alabama art law and international treaty obligations, particularly concerning the provenance and potential repatriation of cultural property. The artist's estate faces a complex decision with significant legal and ethical ramifications, demanding careful consideration of international agreements that Alabama courts may be called upon to interpret or enforce. The core difficulty lies in balancing the estate's potential ownership rights under Alabama law with the broader international framework designed to protect cultural heritage. The best professional approach involves proactively seeking legal counsel specializing in international art law and cultural property. This approach is correct because it acknowledges the complexity of the situation and the need for expert guidance in interpreting and applying international treaties, such as the UNESCO Convention on the means of prohibiting and preventing the illicit import, export and transfer of ownership of cultural property of 1970, which can influence the legal standing of claims to disputed artworks. Such counsel can advise on the specific provisions of relevant treaties, their applicability to the artwork in question, and the procedural requirements for asserting or defending claims under both international and Alabama law. This ensures that the estate acts in compliance with its obligations and maximizes its chances of a favorable legal outcome, grounded in a thorough understanding of the international legal landscape as it pertains to Alabama. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on Alabama probate law and ignore any potential international treaty implications. This is professionally unacceptable because it fails to recognize that international agreements can supersede or influence domestic law concerning cultural property, especially when the artwork's provenance suggests it may have been illicitly exported from another signatory nation. Such an approach risks legal challenges based on international law, potentially leading to adverse judgments and reputational damage. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to assume that the artwork's current possession in Alabama automatically confers clear title, without investigating its history or potential claims under international conventions. This overlooks the fundamental principles of international cultural property law, which aim to prevent the acquisition of illegally exported cultural goods. Alabama courts, when faced with such claims, are bound to consider the principles enshrined in international treaties to which the United States is a party. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to attempt to sell the artwork quickly without addressing the potential international claims. This is ethically and legally problematic as it could be construed as facilitating the trade of illicitly obtained cultural property, potentially violating international law and leading to severe legal repercussions for the estate and any buyer. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes due diligence and expert consultation. This involves 1. Identifying all potential legal frameworks, both domestic and international, that might apply. 2. Assessing the specific facts and circumstances of the artwork's acquisition and history. 3. Consulting with legal experts who possess knowledge of the relevant international treaties and their application within the U.S. legal system, including how they might be considered by Alabama courts. And 4. Proceeding with actions that are demonstrably compliant with all applicable laws and ethical considerations. Question 17. Compliance review shows that a gallery in Birmingham, Alabama, is exhibiting a new artwork that bears a striking visual resemblance to a design created by an independent contractor for a previous exhibition held by the same gallery 5 years ago. The gallery owner is concerned about potential infringement of the contractor's design rights. What is the most appropriate course of action for the gallery owner to take under Alabama law? Option A. Obtain the original design documentation from the contractor, verify its creation date, and consult with an Alabama licensed attorney to assess the duration and scope of the design rights against the new artwork. Option B. Immediately remove the new artwork from the exhibition based on the visual similarity to the contractor's previous design. Option C. Focus solely on the degree of visual similarity between the two artworks to determine if an infringement has occurred, without considering the age of the contractor's design. Option D. Rely on the contractor's verbal confirmation that their design is original and that the new artwork infringes upon it. The correct answer is A. Obtain the original design documentation from the contractor, verify its creation date, and consult with an Alabama licensed attorney to assess the duration and scope of the design rights against the new artwork. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires navigating the specific duration and scope of design rights under Alabama law, particularly when dealing with a potentially infringing work created by an independent contractor. The challenge lies in accurately assessing whether the contractor's design falls within the protected period and whether it constitutes an infringement, necessitating a nuanced understanding of Alabama's intellectual property statutes. Careful judgment is required to avoid potential legal liabilities for the gallery owner. The best professional approach involves a thorough review of the contractor's original design documentation and a comparative analysis against the allegedly infringing artwork, considering the specific timelines established by Alabama law for design rights. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core legal requirements for establishing design right protection and infringement. Alabama law, like other jurisdictions, grants design rights for a limited period. The scope of these rights is defined by the originality and distinctiveness of the design. by meticulously examining the creation date of the contractor's design and comparing it to the duration of protection afforded by Alabama statutes, and then assessing the degree of similarity to the new artwork, the gallery owner can accurately determine if an infringement has occurred. This proactive and legally grounded investigation is essential for responsible business practice. An approach that focuses solely on the visual similarity of the two artworks, without verifying the current legal status of the contractor's design rights, is professionally unacceptable. This failure ignores the temporal aspect of design rights. If the contractor's design rights have expired, there can be no infringement, regardless of visual similarity. Similarly, an approach that relies on the contractor's verbal assurance that their design is original, without independent verification or examination of the design's creation date and scope of protection, is also professionally deficient. This overlooks the legal burden of proof and the potential for subjective bias. Finally, an approach that immediately assumes infringement based on a superficial resemblance and seeks to remove the artwork without legal consultation or a proper assessment of the design rights' duration and scope is premature and potentially damaging, exposing the gallery to claims of wrongful removal or defamation. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and due diligence. This involves 1. Identifying the relevant legal framework, Alabama design rights law. 2. Gathering all relevant facts, including creation dates, documentation, and visual evidence. 3. Consulting with legal counsel specializing in intellectual property law in Alabama. 4. Conducting a comparative analysis of the designs against the legal criteria for duration and scope of protection. 5. Making a reasoned decision based on the legal assessment, rather than assumptions or expediency. Question 18. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a seller in Alabama wishes to maximize their protection against future claims regarding an artwork's authenticity and condition. Which of the following approaches to representations and warranties in the sales contract best balances legal compliance with ethical practice? Option A. The seller provides specific representations and warranties regarding title, authenticity, and condition based on their current knowledge, while also clearly stating any limitations in their information or areas of uncertainty. Option B. The seller includes a comprehensive disclaimer of all express and implied warranties, asserting that the artwork is sold as is with no guarantees whatsoever. Option C. The seller omits any mention of the artwork's condition or authenticity in the contract, assuming the buyer will conduct their own due diligence and that silence implies no warranty. Option D. The seller makes broad, positive statements about the artwork's exceptional quality and undisputed provenance, without providing specific supporting details or acknowledging potential ambiguities. The correct answer is A. The seller provides specific representations and warranties regarding title, authenticity, and condition based on their current knowledge, while also clearly stating any limitations in their information or areas of uncertainty. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the seller's desire to limit liability with the buyer's need for assurance regarding the authenticity and condition of a valuable artwork. In Alabama art sales, the Uniform Commercial Code, UC, as adopted by Alabama, governs such transactions, particularly concerning warranties. Misrepresenting or failing to adequately disclose material facts about an artwork can lead to significant legal and ethical repercussions, including claims of fraud or breach of contract. Careful judgment is required to draft representations and warranties that are both legally sound and ethically transparent. The best approach involves the seller providing specific, verifiable representations and warranties that accurately reflect their knowledge and the known condition of the artwork, while also acknowledging any limitations in their knowledge. This includes warranties of title and, where applicable and known, authenticity and condition. Such an approach aligns with Alabama's UCC provisions, which emphasize good faith and fair dealing in commercial transactions. By being specific and truthful, the seller minimizes the risk of future disputes and upholds ethical standards by not misleading the buyer. This approach fosters trust and ensures that the buyer is making an informed decision based on accurate information, thereby complying with the spirit and letter of Alabama commercial law. An approach that relies solely on a broad disclaimer of all warranties, without disclosing known defects or issues of authenticity, is professionally unacceptable. This attempts to circumvent the buyer's rights under the UCC, which generally implies certain warranties unless effectively disclaimed. A blanket disclaimer that is not supported by good faith or that attempts to hide material facts would likely be deemed unconscionable or ineffective under Alabama law, potentially leading to legal challenges and reputational damage. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to make vague or overly optimistic representations about the artwork's condition or provenance without a reasonable basis for doing so. This can be construed as a misrepresentation, even if not intentionally fraudulent, and can still lead to breach of contract claims if the artwork does not meet the implied or stated expectations. It fails to meet the ethical obligation of providing accurate information to the buyer. Finally, an approach that involves omitting material information about the artwork's history or condition, even if not explicitly asked for, is also problematic. While not all information must be disclosed, deliberately withholding facts that a reasonable buyer would consider important in their decision-making process can be seen as a breach of good faith and fair dealing, potentially leading to legal recourse for the buyer. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the artwork's history, condition, and provenance. Sellers should consult with legal counsel to draft representations and warranties that are both protective of their interests and compliant with Alabama law, ensuring transparency and fairness in the transaction. This includes identifying what is known, what is unknown, and what can be reasonably warranted. Question 19. The risk matrix shows a significant potential for a dispute arising from a consignment agreement for a valuable painting in your Alabama gallery. The consignor, an artist who desperately needs funds, has contacted you inquiring about the status of their painting, which has been on display for 6 months. The consignment agreement is somewhat vague regarding the exact timeline for payment after a sale and does not explicitly detail the process for handling unsold works after a specific period. The artist is concerned because they have not received any communication about a sale and are facing urgent financial obligations. What is the most ethically and legally sound course of action for the gallery? Option A. Inform the artist that the painting has not sold and suggest they retrieve it immediately, as the 6-month period is generally considered a standard selling window. Option B. Offer the artist a significantly reduced advance on the potential sale price, contingent on the eventual sale of the artwork, to alleviate their immediate financial concerns. Option C. Immediately review the consignment agreement to determine the agreed-upon payment terms and the gallery's obligations regarding unsold artwork, and then communicate transparently with the artist about the painting's status and any applicable timelines or procedures. Option D. Advise the artist that the gallery is experiencing financial difficulties and may not be able to remit payment for some time, even if the artwork sells, and suggest they wait patiently. The correct answer is C. Immediately review the consignment agreement to determine the agreed-upon payment terms and the gallery's obligations regarding unsold artwork, and then communicate transparently with the artist about the painting's status and any applicable timelines or procedures. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a potential for significant financial and reputational damage due to a dispute over a consigned artwork. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the rights and expectations of both the consignor, the seller, and the consignee, the gallery, while adhering to Alabama law regarding consignment agreements and sellers' rights. The core of the challenge lies in the ambiguity of the agreement and the potential for misinterpretation of ownership and financial obligations, especially when the artwork's value is substantial and the consignor is in immediate need of funds. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing interests ethically and legally. The best professional approach involves immediately verifying the terms of the consignment agreement and the status of any payments or advances made to the consignor. This includes reviewing the written contract for clauses related to payment schedules, the gallery's commission, insurance, and the process for handling unsold or returned artwork. If the agreement specifies a payment timeline or conditions for payment upon sale, and those conditions have not been met, the gallery should communicate transparently with the consignor about the reasons for the delay and the expected resolution. If the artwork has been sold, the gallery must promptly remit the agreed-upon portion of the sale price to the consignor, less any legitimate commission or expenses outlined in the contract. This approach upholds the consignor's right to receive payment for their property as agreed, respects the terms of the contract, and maintains the gallery's reputation for fair dealing. Alabama law, while not having a single overarching art consignment act, like some states, generally treats consignment as a bailment for sale, where the consignee has a duty to account for the proceeds and return the goods if not sold. The consignor retains title until the sale is complete and payment is made. An incorrect approach would be to unilaterally decide to return the artwork without a clear contractual basis, or without accounting for any potential sale that may have occurred or is in progress. This could violate the consignment agreement if it stipulates a specific period for sale or a process for return, and it fails to address the consignor's right to payment if a sale has indeed taken place. Another incorrect approach is to withhold payment based on a subjective assessment of the artwork's marketability or the gallery's own financial difficulties, without reference to the contractual terms or Alabama law. This disregards the consignor's ownership and right to proceeds from their property. Furthermore, attempting to renegotiate the terms of the agreement after the fact, without the consignor's explicit consent and in a manner that disadvantages them, is ethically questionable and could lead to legal disputes. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes clear communication, adherence to contractual obligations, and a thorough understanding of relevant state laws. When faced with a situation involving a consignment agreement and potential disputes, the first step should always be to consult the written contract. If the contract is unclear or silent on a particular issue, professionals should seek legal counsel to understand their obligations and the consignor's rights under Alabama law. Transparency with the consignor throughout the process, especially regarding sales, payments, and any potential issues, is crucial for maintaining trust and avoiding disputes. Question 20. Stakeholder feedback indicates a need to clarify the calculation and disclosure of buyers' premiums in Alabama art auctions. An auctioneer in Birmingham, Alabama, has just concluded an auction where a painting hammered at $10,000. The auction house policy is to charge a 20% buyer's premium. The auctioneer's commission from the seller is 10% of the total sale price, hammer price plus buyer's premium. If the auctioneer were to present the buyer's premium calculation to the winning bidder in a way that is both transparent and compliant with Alabama law, what would be the total amount the buyer would pay for the painting, and what would be the auctioneer's commission from the seller? Option A. The buyer would pay $12,000 and the auctioneer's commission from the seller would be $1,000. Option B. The buyer would pay $10,000 plus an undisclosed additional fee, and the auctioneer's commission from the seller would be 10% of the hammer price. Option C. The buyer would pay $11,000 and the auctioneer's commission from the seller would be $1,100. Option D. The buyer would pay $12,000 and the auctioneer's commission from the seller would be $1,200. The correct answer is D. The buyer would pay $12,000 and the auctioneer's commission from the seller would be $1,200. Explanation. This scenario presents a professionally challenging situation because it requires balancing the auctioneer's fiduciary duty to the seller with the need for transparency and fairness to potential buyers, particularly concerning the calculation and disclosure of buyers' premiums. The Alabama Code, specifically concerning auctioneers and sales, mandates clear communication and honest dealings. The buyer's premium, while a standard practice to cover auction house costs and profit, must be presented in a manner that does not mislead or disadvantage buyers. The core ethical challenge lies in ensuring that the total cost to the buyer is readily apparent and that the auctioneer's commission structure, which is influenced by the buyer's premium, is handled with integrity. The best professional approach involves clearly stating the buyer's premium as a percentage of the hammer price and then calculating the total purchase price accordingly. This method ensures that the buyer understands the additional cost beyond their bid and that the auctioneer's commission, often calculated on the total sale price, hammer price plus premium, is transparently applied. Alabama law emphasizes fair dealing and preventing deceptive practices in sales. By explicitly itemizing the premium, the auctioneer adheres to these principles, fostering trust and avoiding potential disputes. An incorrect approach would be to absorb the buyer's premium into the auctioneer's commission without explicit disclosure to the buyer. This is ethically problematic as it obscures the true cost to the buyer and could be construed as deceptive. The auctioneer might still receive their intended commission. The lack of transparency violates the principle of honest dealing required by Alabama law. Another incorrect approach is to only disclose the buyer's premium as a lump sum amount at the end of the auction, without providing the percentage or how it was derived from the hammer price. This lacks transparency and makes it difficult for the buyer to verify the calculation, potentially leading to suspicion and distrust. It fails to provide the buyer with sufficient information to understand the full financial commitment. Finally, an approach that involves negotiating the buyer's premium after the hammer has fallen, based on the buyer's perceived ability to pay, is highly unethical and likely illegal under Alabama's consumer protection statutes. This practice is arbitrary, discriminatory, and undermines the integrity of the bidding process, creating an unfair advantage for some buyers and disadvantage for others. Professionals should approach such situations by prioritizing transparency and adherence to all applicable Alabama statutes governing auctions and sales. This involves a clear understanding of how buyers' premiums are calculated and disclosed, ensuring that all parties are fully informed of their financial obligations before and during the bidding process. A proactive approach to clear communication, supported by accurate record keeping, is essential for maintaining professional integrity and legal compliance.